Hey there. It's just 9 o'clock. Great. So you're very welcome. Thanks for joining me. It's a little different, the session tonight. So we're going to start, we're going to do about a 10-minute sort of gentle breathing practice. And then if you've time, you're welcome to stay with me and I'll spend maybe 15 to 20 minutes talking about self compassion and why it's so important and how we can kind of begin to develop it. So, yeah. So let's get set up in the posture first. Just that feeling of a straight back. And if you're on a chair, maybe your feet are on the floor, but also being nice and comfortable. Okay, so we'll do about 10 minutes. So maybe beginning tonight by just checking in to see where are you at right now? Like physically, how are you feeling? And not needing to change anything, just being curious, like you are the way you are. Is it possible to notice in the emotions what's happening? What are your thoughts like? Are there loads of thoughts or not so many? Is the mind quiet this evening or was the evening busy? And yeah, just kind of settling in and seeing where are you at right now. Sometimes it's like it's just good manners sometimes to have a look and see where am I at. And then in your own time, just beginning to move your attention to the breathing, to your own breathing. So it could be the breathing at the stomach, like the rise and fall of the stomach. Or it could be the movement at the chest as you breathe in and out. Or it could be at the nostrils. But just settling for this practice on one of those places, or if you've somewhere else you can notice the breathing more easily, then there. But kind of, it helps to sort of zoom in or focus into one specific place and just begin to notice the in breath and the out breath. And it's just your own breathing, however it is. There's no need to change the breathing. And if the mind wanders off, if you get caught up into thoughts or planning or thinking back about the day, can be sort of light with that, like gentle with that. Ah, yeah, I'm planning. Okay. And you can just be curious, notice what's happening, but still gently but firmly ask the attention to come back to the breathing. Like become curious about the breathing instead. Even if you stay on the breathing just for a moment and go again. But just this returning to the breath, using the breathing as an anchor. It might be possible to bring up a sense of being nourished on the in breath, and on the out breath, just letting go a little bit. But not trying too hard at this, just kind of lightly. The sense we could be nourished on the in breath, and just kind of letting go a little bit on the out breath, relaxing. And maybe connecting with the rhythm of your own breathing. Just sort of the natural ebb and flow of your breathing. Just sitting here with nothing else to do right now. Just noticing your own breathing. Just the natural rise and fall of your breathing. And just staying with the breathing for the last moments until you hear the sound of the bell. out of the practice in your own time. So, so I'm excited to share some thoughts about self-compassion. I'm excited about self-compassion in general. Like I've been practicing meditation and teaching meditation for over 20 years, but the self-compassion side for me has only really kicked off in the last maybe 2 or 3 years. So, and it's something I'm finding, like personally, for me, I'm finding it really interesting. So I'll go through sort of some of the main ideas around this, and it'll be very practical, and we'll end with a short practice that you could do like right in the middle of the day. So maybe starting with like the background to this. The two experts, the main sort of two experts in the world at the moment on this are Krista Neff and Chris Grammer. And I had the pleasure of spending a week with them last summer and studying a lot of this material. And they're sort of in the academic space as well. So it's all kind of research based. And I think we're going to be hearing a lot more about, the benefits of self-compassion from that in the next it's starting already, I think. But maybe just to position, like, what is self-compassion first by saying, by looking at self-care. So self-care is something we're all kind of used to. And self-care might mean, I don't know, going for a walk, or some people might think, oh, I'll go book a massage or something. Or for me, it would mean like going for a coffee and bringing my book, doing something nice for myself, taking a break. And so self-care is like, it's a really good thing. And it's not difficult at all. Like, it's not difficult to do those things. We just have to remember to do them. Self-compassion in comparison is it's much different. It's a much deeper thing. It involves transforming our relationship towards ourselves. Not so much like changing who we are, but changing how we relate to ourselves, right? If that makes sense. And it's a practice, just like mindfulness is a practice. It's not like, I can give you the theory now, and I will, and that's not the thing. You have to then go and practice it and cultivate it yourself over weeks and months and years, which might sound like bad news, but it's really enjoyable anyway. So I think it's worth doing. And the benefits, I think it's one of the best skills it's one of the best things we could learn. And it really can change how we relate to ourselves. So how else would we how could I explain this more? Yeah, I think, well, maybe to say compassion. So compassion is something that comes up in the face of suffering. So we see somebody struggling or having a difficulty, and compassion is the kind of loving or kind response to that. It's a response to suffering. So then self-compassion is when we see that we're struggling and we have that same kind of loving, kind response towards ourselves. Or you could think about it like, if you have a really good friend and they're having a difficult time, and you're talking to them, it's how you feel towards them, the tone of voice you use, how patient you are, even how you hold your physical body, everything. It's all of that is how we would show compassion towards another person. And we all know how to do it. Well, then you can imagine self-compassion is that we had the ability to direct all of that towards ourselves. Now, if you think about it, if you've had a failure or something's gone wrong or some difficulty, how do you actually talk to yourself? How do you treat yourself? How do you think about yourself? And it might be different. It might be different to how compassionately you can treat another person. So the practice is all about sort of learning how to direct that same kind of care towards ourselves. And it can be done. It's just something to cultivate, you know. So then there's like a side thing here that people tend to have an idea that self-compassion is is like a weak thing to do, or it's self-centered or something like that. And in particular, I'm not sure if this is true. I haven't seen research, but I have a sense that men have a harder time with the idea of practicing self-compassion. But actually, what the research is showing is that self-compassion is really correlated with resilience. In other words, the higher our levels of self-compassion, the more resilient we are, the stronger we are, the more robust we are. We become better able at looking after ourselves, and then from that, better able to look after other people. So it's actually like the opposite of what some of the fears would be. It makes us better able to cope, you know, and better able to just accomplish what we want in life. And yeah, so it has all these sort of positive correlations. So, so then moving towards like, how would we practice this? If this is so useful, like, do I just, I don't know, imagine that I can do it, or how do I actually get into it? So Krista Neff came up with this really cool model, and it's a good like way in. There's loads of ways we could start, but I think this is a really good way. So she says that self-compassion has to have self-compassion, three things are needed. So remember that self-compassion only comes up in difficulties. It's how we respond to difficulties. So the first step is mindfulness. So mindfulness is all about being aware of what's happening. So if I'm having a difficulty, realizing I'm having a difficulty. Like instead of saying, I'm grand, I'm fine, no, there's no problem, it's about being like, you know, comfortably able to look and say, I'm exhausted. Without like, you know, getting too hung up about it. I'm exhausted, I'm overwhelmed, I'm anxious, I'm sore, or whatever it is, just looking and seeing that's what's happening right now. I'm frustrated, you know. So it's just being able to sort of be with that instead of suppressing it or pushing it away or running from it. The ability to just see, yep, I'm still kind of steady, but this is what's happening. So that's where mindfulness is the first step. Just knowing if we're having a difficulty, knowing we're having the difficulty, and having the nerve to be able to see it and look at it. The second step is called common humanity, which is like sometimes if we've got a difficulty, we feel isolated. We feel like, you know, I'm the only person who has this problem. It's really embarrassing. There's some flaw in me, and that's why I'm having a hard time. Everyone else is having no problem, but I'm having a really hard time because it's just the type of person I am. I'm not great, or something like that. We can have that type of language and thinking. Whereas bringing in a sense of common humanity is more like, you know, I'm struggling with this thing, but actually everybody struggles from time to time. We all have difficulties. And I struggle with things because I'm human, like not because I'm flawed. It's just part of being human. And so it's a very different feeling. Once we bring in common humanity, it's like we can see things in the right perspective again. It's not a personal flaw. This is what it means to be a human. We all struggle in different ways. I think one of the reasons that dealing with the current coronavirus is a little bit easier than it could be is because of this. While it's a really difficult problem, there isn't much sense that it's like my problem personally, or even my family's problem. This feels like something that we're all in together. And because of that, it can be easier to relate to it, you know? So bringing up this sense of a common humanity. So mindfulness is the first step, common humanity is the second. And the third is then, if I realize I'm struggling and realizing that's just part of being human, then treating myself with kindness. So that's the third step. So then the question is like, how do I treat myself with kindness? So I'm going to have a sip of tea and then we'll go to kindness. So kindness. Again, there's loads of ways we could approach kindness, but I'll jump to the top two. So the most important and most powerful ways we can be kind to others and to ourselves, or how we show this, is touch and tone. So the two things are our touch and the tone that we use. So you could think again of like a good friend telling you that they're having a really difficult time. And you can imagine, you might put your hand on a person's shoulder, or if I think of like if my daughter falls or something, what way do we use touch? So starting with this one, first touch, and we'll come to tone. Touch is really, really powerful. And I think we're missing it at the moment because we don't have as much touch as usual. But if you think about how you show care and compassion for, children, family, people you really care about, a lot of it is shown by how we use touch. So, and there's lots of research showing like when you give a person a hug, that it totally changes their biochemistry. Like there's all this nice serotonin and dopamine released and makes people feel good. It makes them feel happier, and especially if they're having a hard time. So what's really interesting is we can give ourselves the same touch, this same kind of soothing touch, and it has the exact same effect on us. And there's loads of studies again showing this. By offering ourselves soothing touch, we can change how we're feeling. We can change our levels of dopamine and serotonin and these feel-good chemicals. We just need to learn how to do it. So I'll just spend a moment kind of demonstrating what I'm talking about. So types of touch would be, and you could test this out if you're comfortable. You don't have to. You could test this out. I remember like last year when I was in the Netherlands with Chris and Kristen, and there was like about 100 of us. We were in a room, and we were supposed to do these different testing out. What type of soothing touch would you like? I remember feeling like pretty uncomfortable, but I've gotten used to it. So it can be things like placing a hand at the heart, or it could be two hands. And it depends, if people can see you or not, what you're comfortable with. It could be like this, or sometimes people will do something more like a fist at the heart or a hand over the fist, something like that. Or it could be a hand placed on the stomach, or maybe both. And other people will find it. And you can just test this. Like, can you imagine? I mean, this might initially feel uncomfortable, but can you imagine like that the gesture you'd make towards someone you really cared about if they're having a hard time? How would it be to offer that to yourself? What would it be to do this? And so we might end up coming up with a way that we can do that when no one can see us, in which case for me, actually, it's something like this. So we might find something like that, and we might even find another way that is comfortable, like just maybe it's the hands, something. So if we're with other people and we don't feel comfortable, there's a gesture we can offer ourselves that shows it's like we're saying to our minds and our emotions, I'm offering soothing touch. That's what's happening. So that's the first thing, is figuring out touch. So touch, and then tone, soothing tone. So again, like, somebody falls, if you see a child fall, can you picture the tone that we use? And it's something, it's often like, ah, oh, or, It's these tones, they're classified as soft vocalizations. And it turns out, by the way, that this like soothing touch and soothing tone it's been found to be in all cultures. This is like a universal human thing. That when we show compassion to others, we use this soft, soothing touch and soft tone. So using the same thing towards ourselves. So can you imagine, even just to plant the idea, having a really hard time and being able to say to yourself in your thoughts, like, this is really hard. Or even if no one's around, saying that, this is really hard, Keith. This is really hard. And having that kind of tone towards yourself. It's even possible to learn phrases that could be really useful towards ourselves, but maybe that's for another time. So where are we so far? The three parts to having self-compassion is mindfulness, being aware that we're struggling. The second one is a sense of common humanity, like this is part of being human. And then the third is having this kindness towards ourselves, which is often shown with touch and with this soothing tone. So let's finish just with a 2-minute practice where we'll put all of that together. So this is informal. This is the type of thing you could do during the day. You could have your eyes open and lean up against a window. So imagining that there's something difficult, and that's when this is really useful. So there's something difficult going on. And then the first step is mindfulness. So just checking in to see, you could imagine you're doing this now. Something's come up, something's gone wrong for you, or somebody said something, or you're feeling hurt, or whatever it is, or overwhelmed. The first step is mindfulness, just noticing what am I feeling right now? And if it's a difficulty, I might be able to see like, my breathing is fast, or I can see anxiety, or my stomach is tight, or whatever it is. And at that time, we can learn to just look inwards and see, this is difficult. We're not exaggerating. We're not making a fuss about it. But we're just kind of being real and seeing what's there. Yep, this is difficult. This is difficult for me. And then the second step is common humanity, really bringing out a sense that this isn't like uniquely, I'm not the only person to have this difficulty. There's nothing flawed about me that I have it. It's just part of being human that we struggle at times. And we might struggle in different ways, but generally it's true to say that we all struggle from time to time. So just this sense that, this sense of common humanity. It's just part of being human. And then the third step is bringing this kindness towards ourselves, which, could mean using the sense of touch that you could discover that works for you, placing a hand at the chest. And using these kind of soft, nice ways of thinking or speaking towards yourself, like, this is really hard. This is hard for you. I can see Keith, maybe using your name. This is hard for you. But I've seen you come through things before, and I'm here with you. Kind of directing that type of kindness towards yourself, and over time figuring out a way that works for you to do this. So that's the third step. So just coming out of the practice then in your own time. So everything I've been sharing tonight about this practice, I'll send in next Tuesday's email. So every Tuesday morning I send an email about the week's schedule, the week's live meditations. But next Tuesday I'll add just summary notes on what I was discussing tonight about self-compassion. And if it's something you're interested in, I'll just kind of point to where you could go, books to read. And, I'd really encourage you to consider, if this is interesting, consider trying to practice this, like developing a habit out of it. So that's all. I think it's just past 9:30. So thanks so much for joining me. Our next session is Saturday morning at 10 in the morning. So I look forward to seeing you again and practicing with you again soon.